How's everybody feeling today? Especially after that, right? Thank you, Christine. That was amazing. You know, it never ceases to amaze me, the alignment between the music and, the gospel and us being able to enter into that space of singing and dancing and worshiping. And then we come into the centering prayer and then the message. It's like this mellifluous alignment of just yeah, that's one of my favorite words. But it's this beautiful alignment of like the themes and the concepts. And it's almost like, well, it's not almost like, it's literally like God planned it out. You know what I mean? And it's such a beautiful thing. And before I dive in though, I actually would like to ask you guys to help me with something. Because, there's a scripture that says, when two or more are gathered together in my name, I am in the midst. And so God's here with us. And something that I felt deep in my spirit was that there's a lot of people in here that even though it may not be expressed in them behaviorally right now, it might not be expressed in their mannerisms or in their fit, because, we a lot of beautiful people in here, hallelujah. But internally, there's a lot of heaviness. A lot of people dealing with stuff that we don't see written on their faces. And because God is here with us, we have an opportunity to come together in unison, to fight against spirits and principalities, to come in unison, to be loved, to feel love, to share love, and to receive love from each other and from God. And that's a real healing thing. And so I just ask everyone, raise your hand forward. Lord, we pray for every person on this planet, but specifically every person in this room. Whatever they might be going through, whatever they might be facing, whatever they might be fearing, you said that it is in you that we live, we move, and we have our being. You said that you sent Christ so that we might have life and have it more abundantly. You said that we are the head and not the tail. You said that we would mount upon wings like eagles. You said that we would run and not be weary. You said that we would walk and not faint. And so I come to you, Lord, humbly, but in declaration that we would receive the promise that you gave to us, which is that we might receive your grace and that we might experience beauty and joy and surplus in the land of the living. And we extend our hands forward right now because we claim it, Lord. We come humbly, but we come in fervent, devoted belief and knowing that it is in you that we can do all things, and all things will be done for the betterment of your people. And so we celebrate when we say, amen. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit upset because usually I make it like a solid 15 minutes for a brother to get up here and start crying. Man, you know what? It's all these colors I got on right now. I'm feeling jovial, I'm feeling free, and the first thing I do is cry. I love y'all. So you guys know I love you, brother. So as you guys know, we are in a beautiful series, The Rhythms of Grace. But let's keep it 100. How many of us, really, if someone asked us to define, oh, thank you, Pop, I appreciate it. Thank you, appreciate you. How many of us could define in 2 to 3 sentences what grace means to us? If somebody asked us, hey, I hear that there's a series going on called Rhythms of Grace. What is grace to you? We got a feeling associated to it. We know that when somebody starts talking about grace, it makes us feel a little bit better. It's like, ooh, just right, I got grace. But what is it? And you know what? I'm one of the firm believers that I cannot speak objectively about anything I haven't experienced. So I'm not going to come up here and talk about, oh, this is what truth is, and this is what, unless I can read it, unless I've experienced it, I ain't going to say it to you. You know what I'm saying? And so as it relates to grace, I'm going to tell you what grace means to me. Grace for me is the manifestation of Romans 8:28. Remember, I told you about alignment. We were singing about this earlier. That all things work together for the good, to them who love God, who are the called according to his purpose. All things work together for the good, to those who love God and are the called according to his purpose. That sounds really good. But if we just stop there at face value, all things work together for the good, maybe if you're enlightened, you can really internalize the power of that at all times, But if we're keeping it 100, we experience some things where it's like, look, ain't no way you could tell me that was working for my good. You got to be tripping. Come on. Like, we'll listen and we'll clap on Sunday and we're like, doing that teeth suck, you know what I'm saying? And you turn your head, you put the collar under it. But the way I interpret it, the way I experienced it, I think of grace as the truth that all things can be used for the betterment of my life through grace. And so there's a dichotomy there, right? It's like, I know, number one, I have the belief and I have the hope and the expectation that God is turning things around for my good. I have the belief and the knowing and the hope and the trust that God is transmuting the negativity and the challenges I'm experiencing for my good. So there's the God side, but there's also a me side to that, because I'm all about utility and I'm all about taking accountability. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't know about y'all, I'll speak for myself. I'm very imperfect. Accountability is something that I need in order to function. Like, I got to be able to look at me, because half the time, you know what I'm saying? If something's going awry, I could be like, oh, okay, that was Ryan. Okay, we got something to work on tomorrow, But the thing about my interpretation of grace is, yes, God is working things out for my good, but also I have the ability to utilize everything I experience for my good. It's not just something that's outsourced. See, we only outsource grace, but grace is actually something of great utility. Yes, God gives us grace, and God uses his grace to bless us and to protect us and to guide us. But his grace is also something that we can harness. It's something that we can utilize. It's something that we can equip ourselves with so that we can navigate the world and our experiences in a better way. One example that I will give about being able to use everything for our good, being able to leverage grace, I think about worship. Because, again, I'm only talking about me. If you find some utility out of it, I'm grateful for it. But for me, I believe in the core of my being, God does not need me to worship him. You're talking about all-knowing, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, all-powerful God who has no need. Because if God had need, that would mean God had humanity. God doesn't have need. God is all. You know what I'm saying? And so when God calls me to worship, I see that as God giving me something for me. Because when I worship, I enter into a space. I can't have ego and gratitude at the same time. And so when I worship, Ryan's got to get out the way. That's why I cry. That's why I emote up here. Because I know that it's him. I know that everything he's doing, everything he's telling me to do, he's actually saying, I'm saying to do this so that you can help yourself, fool. And so I am excited to worship because it is great. It is in grace that I'm able to worship. It is in grace that with my raggedy voice, because you know what? There's a lot of beautiful singing folk up here. I'm not one of them yet. Now be careful. One day, maybe. If it do happen, you gonna know it. I say hello to you. Hello? Is it me? Y'all got to kick me out of here, I'm telling you. I tell Danny that all the time, not to get off topic, but I tell him all the time, like, look, this is why God lets you sing. Because you're going to be out here humble with it. Okay. But that is such a beautiful application. You know what I mean? It's like one thing, one concept, we think of worship, and you realize, oh, this is something that God gave me. This is a grace that is working towards my good. And it also flips the script, because now I don't feel shame when I don't come to church. I don't feel shame if I'm not feeling it one day, if I'm feeling really heavy and I don't want to raise my hand during the worship. You know what I'm saying? Instead, I'm like, oh, I get to. How much does life change? How much does our lens change when we start saying, I get to about stuff? I get to be at Heartway. I believe there will be many in the future, but right now there's one Heartway. I just so happen to live 10 minutes away. You know what I'm saying? If I really needed to, I could jaywalk over here, you know? As grace. And so, tying that in to the topic of today, navigating our deficiencies with grace. The purpose of this message is to apply this perspective, apply this understanding of the enormity and the expansiveness and the truth of what grace is, and applying that to a place that all of us really could use some help with, which is in our deficiencies. And so during this time, I'm going to give you 4 steps to navigating our deficiencies with grace. I'm going to give us 4 steps to navigating our deficiencies based on 4 types of grace that God gives us. So let's start with step 1. Adopt humility as a lens of perception. Let's stop and perceive that. Just think about that for a second. Adopt humility as a lens of perception. Now, the type of grace that entails, because remember, I'm giving you 4 steps based on 4 types of grace that we're given. Adopt humility as a lens of perception. The grace that we are given, that I want us to apply to this, is the ability to change our perception. Because we don't always have the opportunity to choose what's going to happen. I know that we love to talk about manifestation. Manifestation is powerful. We love to talk about, creating our lives. And, anybody who's been to a motivational speakers conference or something, they're talking to you about change, and you can change this, and you've got the power, you can break the shackles and all that. But at the same time, there's a reason why there was a story about Jonah. You know what I'm saying? That man got caught up by a fish. They didn't even have marine biology back then. You know how shook he had to have been? Whether it happened or not, it don't matter. The message is the same. A big old fish went and grabbed this fool and spit him somewhere else. And apparently that's where God wanted him to be. Point of the matter is, stuff be happening. Like that's, you know what I'm saying, in layman's terms. And so we can't always control the events in our lives. We, for dang sure, can't always control people. Hold up. Before y'all start praising too hard, including ourselves. Because we be mad about other people tripping, we be tripping in real time. looking in the mirror, tripping to ourselves, mad about somebody else tripping. You know what I'm saying? We can't control people. But what we can control is the perspective from which we perceive everything that occurs. Because there's a reason why it says in the scriptures, it says, be angry, but sin not. He's literally saying, even if your lens is a lens of rage in this moment, I'm not telling you to get rid of the rage. I'm telling you to be mindful of the outcome of it. But I'm also saying, hey, I'm not telling you that rage is the ideal lens right now. I'm just letting you know I permit you to do so. And so if I'm allowed to grab the low-hanging fruit, am I allowed to grab the high fruit? Am I allowed to choose a different perspective that actually benefits me? Because see, that's what this is really about for me. Just being straightforward. I'm not even thinking about what I have on this tablet right now. Literally telling you the truth of why we're talking about this right now. It's because for me, I realize that I am going to die. One day, let me change that. This body won't be moving. I'm going to be around. Y'all may not call me Ryan, but I'm going to be, you know what I'm saying? Doing my spirit thing. Like, you know, I'm going to be out here, believe that. And I'm going to still be fresh. Trust that. Like, I'll be a rabbit fresh out of my mind. Like, I don't care. But this form at some point will be gone. And so I also realized that when this form is gone, what I am in my core, I'm not threatened. I know it for a fact. And I don't mean that in a cocky-oo sense, because obviously this applies to everybody. But I'm saying I feel it in my spirit, this deep knowing that like this thing has not bound me. Even though the experiences I have in this life can definitely feel binding at times. But that being the case, if God has given me grace, if God has grace protecting me, if God's put a hedge of protection of grace around me, and God has given me grace to utilize, that says that I can maximize my life, that I have autonomy and decisive decision-making, I have the ability to improve my life, then how am I going to do it? And let me get about that business now. When the Bible says I'm about my Father's business, I believe my Father's business is living the hell out of my life. I mean that. Living it, and I don't just mean in a you know, partying and going crazy where you're like, yeah, it's good to have fun, but I mean living the heck out of my life in the sense of like, I want to make sure I lived it all out. I loved who I wanted to love. I celebrated who I wanted to celebrate. I blessed who I wanted to bless. I was a vessel for what God wanted to do. I don't care if they knew Ryan Howard. But you know what? The people who are on this planet and the generations that come after those people will have tasted Ryan's love and the fruits of its labor. That's what I care about. And so that being the case, how do we leverage this grace, this tool that God has given us? That's what this is about. So when we talk about humility, the thing I want you to think about, adopting humility as a lens of perception. How does humility help you to navigate your deficiencies? It's because, first off, it's because humility is not just this sweet thing that God calls us to do so that we can humble ourselves and shrink ourselves so that we don't make anyone else feel uncomfortable. No, to heck with that. Humility is a tool. It is a means to actually maximize our capacity. It's just the most logical, realistic lens. One of the things I love about psychology is it shows me how much bullcrap is in my mind and how much bullcrap we speak and we say and we think that actually has no legitimate backing. And one thing that I've learned from psychology is that humility is the most practical and effective means to move forward in our lives, because when you build your house on sand, in other words, when you build your mind on lies, that house is going to fall. And when you derive your confidence from egoic lies, when you derive your confidence from these things you're telling yourself, if you're confident because you look so good, there's a part of you that's feeling confident about that because you think you had something to do with your face. That's crazy. Like, that's crazy. You literally showed up and like, your mama fine, your dad fine, you fine. Like, dope, you know? But it's like, for that to be a source of ego, for that to be a tool that we leverage to convince ourselves, that's why when I walk in this room, I should feel confident and comfortable. Or your intelligence. Again, congratulations on your genetics. You can learn, but IQ, it's much less elastic. So if I have my intelligence, if I tell myself I'm confident because I'm intelligent, because I'm smarter than other people, that's another thing you're basing on a lie, because the truth is that's not actually your doing. And if I'm basing my confidence off of things that truthfully have nothing to do with me, that means my confidence actually isn't based on who I am at my core. It's based on what I was given. You know what I'm saying? It's like if I told myself I'm Usain Bolt because I drive the fastest car in the lot. What happens when I get out the car? Please, I tore my Achilles 2 years ago. You think I'm trying to run for nothing? Please, but get me a power scooter or something, you know? But the point of that, the point of that is a faulty foundation from which to build your confidence. If you're looking around you, you're saying, what I have or what I do is the reason why I'm capable and confident and worthy, all that's going to do is fall, number one, when you encounter someone who's got more than you, or you encounter someone that does it better, or when you lose your access to that thing, at which point you realize it was not yours in the first place. You mismanaged what God gave you because you took it and you decided to add it to your ego as opposed to using it as a means to be of value. Whereas humility says, again, telling you about my definitions, the way I relate to humility is we tend to apply humility outward. You know, we say, oh, I want to be humble. And which that's a good thing. Like we focus on, we want to have humble engagements with people. You know what I'm saying? And we focus on trying to make sure that behaviorally we express ourselves in a humble way. But I like to turn humility inward. And for me, turning humility inward manifests in this way. I don't give my emotions and my thoughts too much authority. Because I realize that if I'm going to be humble, if I'm actually going to adorn humility, I have to realize that just because it popped up in my head and just because it makes sense to me doesn't mean it is the objective truth for everybody. And I also have the humility to understand that the shoes I'm in confirm to me the thoughts I'm having. That's called confirmation bias. Because if I was wearing your shoes, if I lived your experiences, my perspective would be different. And there is dichotomy in truth. I can have a perspective on a situation, my perspective is real, and I've analyzed the heck out of it, and I really feel confident that I was thorough in my analysis. And then I make a judgment based on that. And then I turn around and I stand from another person's position and I go, oh, it's kind of different from over here. I mean, I don't have to disagree with what I was saying a second ago, because that was from a different perspective, but I can acknowledge that this perspective had the same amount of validity, you know? And so all of this to say, when I have the humility to step back and not have this confidence and this declarative, self-concept, I know what's right. Oh, I know how I feel. You know what I mean? Which, by the way, we don't want to just get rid of acknowledging ourselves. Like, for example, when someone, God forbid, is victimized, it's very important that they are willing to acknowledge the reality of their experience. And they need to be declarative in that. So this takes discernment, right? But it's just understanding that we can use that for our betterment, but don't use it to weaponize it. You know what I mean? Because we got to acknowledge that everybody's got that same thing within them. We're all glimmers of God's genius, So adopting humility as a lens of perception. That's step one to navigating our deficiencies with grace. Step two, creating an empowering narrative around your deficiencies. So I have two scriptures that I'd like to read, starting with Ephesians 2:8-9. For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith. And this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. Saying again, hey, it's through grace that we're blessed, that we're saved, that this grace that has been bestowed upon us, it's not from ourselves. That it's not by works, so that we can't boast. This is talking about humility, what we were addressing in step one, right? Now let's slide to 2 Corinthians 12:9-10. But he said to me, this is God saying, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Mind you, I love this. I'm not at the point yet where I can delight in insults, hardships, and persecutions. I want that for you. I really do. I want it for me too. I just have to say preemptively, this is a disclaimer that I'm not there yet. But the beauty of this is that this right here is an empowering narrative around one's perceived deficiency. They're saying, oh, I feel weak. I feel incapable. I feel limited. Oh, I know. I'm going to praise about it. Because when I'm weak, God is strong. When I'm weak, it's almost as if they had this imagery in their head. It's like a valve. If you see a valve full of stuff, what's the purpose of a valve? It's meant to have things travel through it. It's meant to be a vessel. If you got a whole bunch of stuff, in that valve, it's in the way. But it's almost as if this person said to themselves, I'm weak. What's synonymous with me being weak? I'm getting empty. Me is getting out the way. You know what I'm saying? That valve is opening up. And guess what? When that valve opens up, oh, I can't wait to see what God's going to bring through it. And they flipped the script on a deficiency and they made it a proficiency. And when we learn to do this and we learn to practice this, we can accomplish that with efficiency. We can start to have this on speed dial, where when we witness ourselves with perceived failures, when we witness ourselves having issues or struggling through stuff or not getting the outcomes we want, we gain the ability to say, number one, let me take a step. Let me first adopt that humble lens of perception. The humble lens is saying, first off, obviously I'm not the highest tower in the city, but I'm also not the lowest. Because real quick, something important, humility isn't being the lowest thing. Because ego, if it can't make itself the highest tower, it'll make itself the lowest tower. Because what ego really wants is to be special. Whether it wants to be special by perceiving itself as a demigod, or whether it wants to be special by perceiving itself as a victim. So it's like, okay, I'm going to first adopt this humble lens and say, okay, I'm not the highest, I'm not the lowest. That's not what this is about. But what I am going to say is, I'm not going to jump the gun. I'm going to be humble and not assign a meaning to this already. I'm going to let God fill in the meaning. I'm not going to call this a failure. I'm not going to call me a failure. I'm not going to deny, you know what I'm saying? I'm not going to make this a foregone conclusion. I'm going to be humble enough to say, okay, Lord, this doesn't feel good. I feel like a failure in this moment. I feel like I haven't gotten the outcome I wanted, but I'm going to leave space for you to reveal more to me. Then you come into step 2. You create an empowering narrative around the deficiency. Once you create an empowering narrative with the deficiency, you now can get a different outcome because you've rerouted. Like me, for example. One of the biggest things that I deal with, those who know me know I talk a lot about highly sensitive people. Highly sensitive people deal with something called sensory processing sensitivity, which I'm not going to get deep into it, but essentially it is differences in their central nervous system. There's differences in how we experience the world. There's activation of different parts of our brain. Our insula, which is called the seat of consciousness, has a higher degree of activation. So as a result, we viscerally feel stimuli differently. It's like, imagine if there's 10 people in a room and a light gets turned on in the room. 9 of those people encountered that light in the same way. That one person, that light was more intense because they're processing the stimuli on a more acute level. You know what I'm saying? And so there are positives and negatives to that. Like HSPs tend to be highly, highly observant and intuitive. In a room full of 100 people, it'll be the HSP that says, what's that going on over there? You know what I'm saying? Because they're attuned to that data, to that stimuli. That's why I love psychology, because when I interact with people, I'm attuned to the stimuli of their behavioral manifestations. But on the other side of that, we get overstimulated really easily. When them email notifications be going off the deep end while I'm working, you know what I'm saying? I'll get so overstimulated. Now if one of my friends shoot me a call, shoot me a text, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, oh, not another one. And I need a moment to recalibrate before I respond to that. And it sounds crazy, but like, my folks know I be ghosting sometimes just because I need a couple hours after work because my brain is fried. You know what I'm saying? So there's positives and there's perceived negatives to that. But what I've taken that as it relates to the quote-unquote deficiencies that come out of that, right? These deficiencies are an opportunity. I had a day where I realized, and it was funny because it was a day where I was really there like, can I just keep it 100? It was a day where I was moping. Like, I was feeling bad for myself. You know what I'm saying? Just like, man, this ain't fair, and da-da-da-da-da. And then I had this, I don't even want to call it an epiphany because that sounds dramatic. But it was just this moment where I said to myself, how many other people deal with this? And then objectively, non-egoically, how many of those people are trained to understand it like you are? How many of those people are trained to communicate that information? And I literally said, that's a mission. I feel this. so that I can leverage it for the betterment of people who deal with it and who didn't have the equipment that I was given. The equipment that I was given, my parents made it so that I could get a good education. My parents did that. I don't have credit. I did the work based on the blessing that I got from them, but I didn't make that blessing happen for me. God set it up so I could get the training. And now, since I've got this sensibility, I've got the practice, and I've got the nuances and the deeper understanding of that reality. So when I talk to somebody, they know I'm not spitting bull crap because I live it on a daily basis. So when I design a program for them, I can tell them, well, I won't say this because it's going, but in my head, I know that I gave them the best doggone program they possibly could have gotten. I know I killed that. And why do I know it? Because it's what I needed. And so my deficiency became my proficiency. And because I committed myself to that perspective, I now do it with efficiency. That's the beauty in it. These last two are quick. These are quick. Number 3 is personalize your life strategy. The grace that God gives us that applies to this one is foresight. We have the ability. We think about our ability to look in past and future as something negative a lot of times because, like, we be suffering it. You know, we look backwards and we get shameful and we feel depressed. We look forward, we get anxious. You know what I'm saying? We're like, dang, like I can't bring my mind anywhere. We think it is a negative thing, but the truth is our ability to have foresight, it's the reason why we have bank accounts. It's the reason why we save money because we're planning for the future. It's the reason why we go to school and we strategize to make moves in our career. It's the reason why we have family planning. You know what I mean? All of these things, when you have a building, you gotta get the blueprints. Why? The blueprint is the visual preparation for the manifestation. You know what I'm saying? That can only happen because we have the ability to look in the future. That is a grace that we're given. Because don't quote me on it. I'll only be, talking about human psychology. I don't know how lizards do, but I don't know if lizards have foresight. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if they do, but we do. So we got that grace. So let's use it, And one of the ways for us to do that is creating a life strategy, a personalized life strategy. If you know what your deficiencies are, and I call them deficiencies not to make them sound negative, but it's to be objective. If we're all rainbow all the time and we only talk, I have this going on, but God's still working on me, that's a cop-out. When you stop shaming yourself for them, you can objectively look at them and say, oh, that's what the barrier is. Let me address the barrier. So it's objectively a deficiency because it's not a proficiency. And if I address it properly, it can become a proficiency. That's all it is. And so when I create a life strategy and I'm personalizing it, I'm saying to myself, what are my issues? What are the barriers to my better life? What are the barriers in me? Okay, now I'm going to create a strategy, not just to get where I want to go, but getting where I want to go in the context of my weaknesses. You get what I'm saying? If you say you want to build a business, if you say I want to do this thing, that's great. Find someone else who did it. But also know they can't give you the full blueprint for how you're going to do it. You got to personalize that thing. You got to get really clear and aware on who you are and what your needs are. And that's how we can start to change the trajectory of our lives. We utilize that foresight to say, where do I want to go? What do I need to fix? What do I need to adjust? Now I'm going to plan a strategy to deal with it. And you know why I just repeated that statement so many times? Because we'll listen to this and then we'll go home and not plan nothing out. This is my homework to anybody who wants to do it. Go home and pick 3 areas of your life, whether it be relationship, whether it be finances, whether it be hobbies, or playing badminton. I don't care. Pick 3 aspects of your life that you wish were better. I don't care if they were better, if you wanted them better by 3 percentage points. Make a 1-month plan. A 1-month plan of how you'll get a 5% improvement in that space. You identify, what does a 5% improvement look like for me? What could I realistically do in a month to make it look better, to make it feel better, to make it a little bit happier? Okay, what does that look like? Get really clear on that. Now, identify the behaviors that I need to do on a daily or weekly basis, realistically. Don't say I'm gonna read a book every day. That's why I'm saying small increments, a reasonable behavior that you can employ every week or every day to get yourself there. And just see how easy it is to change the life that you've been cursing God about. How easy it is to leverage the grace that he's given you. But we get so caught up that we forget that that grace is a tool to use. It's not just something to pray to God for and then get mad when the heavens don't open up and doves flying down with a set of instructions. Get them dirty. His grace is sufficient for you. It's sufficient. My grace is sufficient for you. But not so that you can sit on your butt. It's sufficient for us to co-create together. And so I leave you with this. The last piece of navigating your deficiencies with grace. Develop relaxed intensity. I was at a birthday party about a weekend ago. I ended up meeting this individual, this cool guy. We're playing musical chairs. It was just one of those things where like, I'm a peppy, energetic guy. He's a peppy, energetic guy. And then low key, like he was pretty jacked and I was like, that's dope, So like, I was like, all right, I want to be friends with him. And so like, we were talking and stuff, you know what I mean? We were talking and stuff. Come to find out, this gentleman is the CEO of a franchise. He started it I think he started it in 2017, and I'll suffice it to say his franchise now has 17 different locations across the US. So he's doing very well for himself, like very well for himself. And the reason why I verbalized that is to give context for what he shared with me. And so what I started doing was, we were just sitting there talking. And so I just really wanted to hear what he had to say about the nuances of his journey. And so I asked him, I said, and he was 50 years old. And I said, you're 50 now with a wife and 3 kids. I said, when you wake up in the morning, I said, what is the fire that gets you out of bed and going every day? That's question 1. And I said, question 2, is that fire any different from the fire you had when you were 30? And he was like, that's a really good question. And so as a result, we start talking. Like talking on a deeper level. You know what I mean? Because you be talking with folks, and then when people peep game on you and they like have a little bit more respect for what you got to say, then they start talking with you, and you can get the real good stuff. And so I'm hollering at this cat, you know what I'm saying? Sorry, I went into different lingo for a second. So I'm talking to this man, and he says to me, he goes, one of the most important things that I've learned over the past 20 years? And I said, what? He said, because I was productive when I was 30. He's like, I was getting things done. He was like, I was already business oriented. He goes, but there's one thing that I developed that really changed not the trajectory of my life, but my ability to produce at a rapid rate. He's like, it made it so where I would have gotten to at 50, I got to by 35. And where I would have gotten to at 65, I got to at 40. And I said, if you don't stop playing and tell me what you're about to say, you know? And he said, I developed relaxed intensity. He said, every day I make sure that I'm fun and I'm jovial and all of this. He said, but the thing that only few people understand is I'm very intense. He said, I'm intense and I'm intentional. He said, when it comes to my business, when it comes to my family, when it comes to my responsibilities, that I'm a wolf. He said, I'm gonna eat it up. He said, I ain't playing no games. Like, and his face changed. I was like, dang, this cat's a werewolf. You know what I'm saying? Like, but it was gangster at the same time because he was serious. He's like, I don't play about my stuff. He's like, but I've learned to be relaxed about it. And he said, because stress is energetically exhausting. And I would not have made it to 50 if I hadn't learned to A, relax in my intensity, and B, relax in the intensity. He said, when you're running a business, you learn to live in intensity. And so I'm ending here to say, our lives get intense sometimes. Deficiencies don't make that intensity any better. They tend to intensify the intensity. They tend to make stuff harder. But just meditate on that. If I can, number one, adopt the humility in my perception. If I can, B, create an empowering narrative around my deficiencies. If I can, C, create a personalized life strategy so that I can move forward in success, in abundance, despite those deficiencies. And then 4, develop relaxed intensity in the process. If I do those 4 things and I commit to them, I can utilize the grace that God has given me to create a much more fulfilling life. And that's why we're here today. Thank you, everybody. We love you guys so much. Have a great one. See you next Sunday.